Greetings, 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 greetings. It is I, King Clifford Jefferson, a son of Godfrey, the fifth kind of man Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem. I am the reincarnation of King Edgar the Peaceful, which we know here at the Third Temple English Church of England as Jesus Christ. It is May 14th, 2025, which is equivalent to the birth year 2975. I greet you in the name of my Queen, Sister Galveston from the House of Galveston. I greet you in the name of Archbishop Belmont from the House of Belmont. I greet you in the name of all those who are trying to get understanding of what it is that we are here and called to do. I'm glad you are here to join me this evening. I hope you enjoy part one of We the People, the English in God's Church. Once again, I hope you enjoy part one of We the People, English in God's Church. It's all connected. Okay, we're going to draw a narrative again from Taj Tariq Bey, one of these master teachers of the Morris Times Temple of America, as well as Morris history. Peace be to him. But for the sake of the lesson, I must reveal the truth to the people. All right. The lesson that he's talking about is uno sanctum usury. Uno sanctum usury. We talked about that earlier, and we discussed the term usufruct. Usufruct. Usufruct is the law governing the illegal use of somebody else's property. Okay? We know when we talked about earlier about Genesis 1, verse 26, when God created man and woman in his image and his likeness, as well as he gave him dominion over all things, including the land. That is the birthright or inheritance that was given from God based upon the concept that we know in English law as lottery of season. Okay, the word lottery of season means the delivery of possession, contrast to the term adverse season, which means the taking of possession. When you're taking the possession, that means it doesn't necessarily mean it's yours, because to take something means that it's not given, versus given, meaning delivery. When somebody delivered you something, it either was promised to you or it was a present, gift, etc. Okay, all these things must be considered within the law. When we look at the Constitution of 1947, the Constitution of 1844, as well as the Constitution of 1776, we see that in the 1947 and 1844, which I discussed in my first part of this lesson, has to do with we the people and the Almighty God and the conversation they were having about their life, civil rights, and religious rights that were preserved throughout generations and generations to come, which was the foundation for the creation of the 1947 Constitution, which has to deal with civil and religious liberties. Okay, and we read the first article of that Constitution, which we'll read in a second. It's very important to understand that there's a conversation between God and the people. And the conversation between God and the people is all the people, not one, not two, not three. It ain't a bunch of people from different nations, different countries. It's one people, because the language in which it's talking about in the Constitution and reference to a Constitution related to the Almighty God having a conversation with his people. And we must know that God, if he's speaking to the people, he must have a faculty being a voice box. And he must be able to speak a language, because when God speaks to his people, he speaks to his people in their own language. And this so happens to be the language of English in the Constitution. And if the Constitution is written in English, created by the English people, and the conversation in the Constitution about the English people goes back to a conversation with God, and we know that everybody's God, and their Constitution in relation to the people is written in their own language. That meant that the language of the people in reference to the conversation going back to time immemorial when God created them in their likeness, pursuant to Genesis 1, verse 26, happens to be the English people. So it's not talking about anybody else but the English people in the state of New Jersey. I ain't talking about nowhere else but the state of New Jersey. We the people of the state of New Jersey is not we the state of the state of New Jersey. The state of New Jersey originally was called the colonies, which worked for the people, because the people were the sovereigns based upon Article 1, Article 2, Article 3, Article 4, Article 5, Article 6, within that Constitution of 1947, which is identical in purity to the 1844 Constitution, which goes back to the common law of England that was there in the 1776 Constitution before it was colonized, and that law going back to time immemorial with the English people and the relationship that they have with their God, which is called a contract in regards to the conveyance of the land promised by God to his people, okay, by way of the law. And the only thing you have to do is go into that possession and take it. When I say take it, it's not taking it by force. It's taking it by way of the law. Because law is the conversation we're talking about, i.e. the Constitution. That is the supreme law of the land. We ain't talking about no abstract conversation. We're talking about a concrete conversation between the people and God. What God? The English God. And what people? The English people. And apparently God was a man, because when God said he created man in his own image, we know in the beginning was the Word was God, the Word became flesh and dwelt amongst man. Okay? Very, very important to understand that before I go on. All right. So with that being said, if you watch part one of this lecture, then part two is going to be a pretty much expounding on that. But we're going to listen to a little bit more of Taj Tariq's video on the lesson he's talking about Sanctum and Lucifer. Okay, because that's what he claims to be talking about. But there's nothing in that lecture in regards to what that or those terms actually mean. Okay, so with that, let's get started with this marvelous lesson. For all those who are going to be viewing, please make yourself known in the chat line. I don't like to be talking to myself. If you got a chat line, please just come on the comment, paste your comments. You got any questions, please ask them, because ignorance of the law is no excuse, especially if you are an English person. Okay, so with that, let's get started. We're going to listen to Taj Tariq's video, and while we listen to it, we're going to draw from what he's saying and see if it applies to him and the group of people or the group of society, other people that he's talking about in regards to the birthright that he claims is for them versus the birthright that we claim is for us, which is written in the law. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. This is not to talk about Taj, but ignorance of the law is no excuse, and you're subject to the your teacher. Okay, and once again, we see the Holy Quran, Circle 7 is specific, and chapter 29 about magistrate and subject. We review that first before we go into the video. You shouldn't hide from the truth, because the truth will find you. So if you're watching this video, you might as well make yourself known, because whether you don't, you will have to when the truth comes out to the world, which is being revealed right now. Hold that thought. Greetings, Brother Nunley from the House of Nunley. Glad you were able to join us and make yourself known. The reason we say King Edgar is the peaceful, because he's called the King of Peace. The word Jefferson means peaceful place. So I am the reincarnation of King Edgar the Peaceful, i.e. known as Jesus Christ, or the Vicar of Christ, or the Melchizedek, or the King of Peace. All right, King of Salem. All right, it's very important for you to understand that in the concrete form versus the abstract form, because in the beginning was the Word was God, and the Word became flesh and dwelt amongst man. And when we're talking about the law, the Word, we're talking about the law that God gave. And we know that the Bible was written by, or was created by, or compiled by a king. Okay, a king. This king was called King James, the sixth king of Scotland and the soon to be the first king of England. He was not an English king of ancestry. Okay, that is very important to understand. Nor any Scottish king or queen who descended down from them. Okay, because in order for you to have a birthright, you have to be a heir, a descendant of the English people, because the law that was given based upon the conversation between the people and God was in English. If you go into any other nation, any other country, in regards to the law in reference to the people, it's written in their language so the people can understand it. Now, if you speak the English language or understand the English history, but you're not English, it does not apply to you. I didn't say that. I didn't say that. God said that. Okay? And God is government orders department. God's government here on earth. This is called a fusion of government, a church state or a sovereign state. You must understand these terms. All right. Chapter 29. Magistrate and subject. Because I'm drawing from Taj Tariq. All right, we're going to draw on his lesson today on Uno Sanctum and Lucifer. Okay, and who created Uno Sanctum and why was he created and who did it apply to? Okay, very important. Uno Sanctum Lucifer. And Lucifer is governed by the law of usury, meaning the use of property. This property we're talking about is land. Okay, the land that was promised by God to his son. Okay, his son, the one you call the Christ being. Okay, we understand that the Anglo-Saxons were called the wise men or Wittenmont. Okay, the wise council. All right, I'm gonna briefly touch upon that before we go into Taj's argument. I was a member of the Moorish Science of America under Grand Sheik Lorentz Bay, but I'm no longer affiliated with that society because I am, in fact, a Anglo-Saxon Berber. Okay, a Anglo-Saxon Berber. You are our Anglo-Saxon Berbers, the favorites of heavens. Okay, magistrate and subject. O thou the favorite of heaven, whom the sons of men, thy equal, have agreed to raise thee to sovereign power, and set as a ruler over themselves. Consider the ends and importance of their trust, facts more than the dignity and the height of thy station. So this is the Constitution, the preamble of the Constitution of New Jersey, 1844, 1947. Okay, before the colonization of New Jersey, now called the state of New Jersey, it was inhabited by the original people who were called the English people, because the only law that was there at that time was the English common law. Okay? The common law that was there when God was having the conversation with the English people, with the language that they can understand it, so they can apply it. Okay? Very important. So, O thou, the favorite of heaven. We're talking about God's son. Okay? Not all sons, but God's son. Okay? O thou, the favorite of heaven, whom the sons of men, thy equal. All right? So they're equal. So, I mean, he was chosen from out of society. He was raised from amongst the people, have agreed to raise to sovereign power and to set as a ruler over themselves. Consider the ends and the importance of the trust, facts more than the dignity of the height of thy station. Y'all better listen. Thou art clothed in purple and seated on a throne. The crown of majesty is invested in thy temples. This is talking about the English Benedictine reform started by King Edgar the Peaceful in the 6th century as a result of the Roman Catholic influence on the English church, which we're going to talk about today, which i.e. the Catholic Church has everything to do with unum sanctum and usufruct. Okay? Very important. There are clothed in purple and seated on the throne, crown of majesty invested in thy temples. That means that the same law that's governed under the crown of England, under his majesty, who represents the people on behalf of the people, all right, the scepter of power is placed in his hand, but not for thy own self, but that ensign given, not meant for thy own, but for the good of thy kingdom. All right? I'm giving you the concrete interpretation of it versus the abstract. The glory of the king is the welfare of his people. His power and dominion rest on the hearts of his subjects. The mind of a great prince is exalted with the grandeur. So the heart of a great prince, where am I at? The mind of a great prince is exalted with the grandeur of his situation. He above his high thing and searches for the business worthy of his power. He calls together the wise men of his kingdom and consulteth amongst them with freedom and hears the opinions of them all. Okay, so who are these wise men we're talking about? Let's talk about that. I talked about that now in part one. Let's quickly talk about it in part two. Anglo-Saxon. Anglo-Saxon law, later called decree or judgment, was the legal system of the Anglo-Saxon England from the 6th century until the Norman conquest of 1066. It was a form of assumed to be German law based upon what the German identified as by, which they call as barbarians, and based on an unwritten custom known as folk right, and on the written law enacted by the kings with the advice of their written or council. By the later Anglo-Saxon period, a system of courts had developed to administer the law, while enforcement was responsibility of the aldermen and roll office officials such as the sheriffs. Okay, very, very important for you to understand that. We also go to the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica for confirmation. Just brushing up on our history, brothers. That's all we're doing. Brushing up on our history. All right. Berbers. All right. Berbers, the name under which are included various branches of the indigenous Libyan race of North Africa. Since the dawn of history, Berbers have occupied tracts between Mediterranean, Sahara, Egypt, and the Atlantic. The original name is doubtful. Some believe it is to be derived from the word barbarians employed by the Greeks and later by the Romans. Other attributes of first use of the term Arab to conquerors. However, it may denote to a tribal title known as Baraba or Barabarata, appearing in Egyptian inscription of the 17th to the 13th century BC. Okay, but my focal point here in the 1911 Encyclopedia Britannica is this right here. We're talking about Berbers. The Arab built this according to what's his name? Start from the start. All right, because we're talking about the Holy Quran, Circle 7. That's where we're reading from. This is exactly where we're reading from. We're going to start from here. The fact has been emphasized by Dr. R.G. Latham, who writes, all that is not Arabic in the Kingdom of Morocco. The language that Moroccans speak should be the language of Arabic, not English. Okay? That should be the language of Arabic, not English. Most of you Moorish Americans speak the English language. So if your Quran, based upon the inheritance that was promised to you from Allah, the name of your God, then you must refer to that language for you to understand them. If you're not reading that language, you're not understanding the promise promised to you from God. The language that you're reading, based upon the promise that you claim is yours, is from ours, which is the English language, and going back to the conversation that God was having with the English people because they both spoke the same language. Okay? So the fact has been emphasized by Dr. R.T. Latham, who writes, all that is not Arabic in the Kingdom of Morocco, all that is not Arabic in the French province of Algeria, and all that is not Arabic in Tunis, Tripoli, and Fez is Berber. The explanation lies in the profound distinction of their characteristics. The Arab is a herdsman and a nomad. The Berber is an agriculturist and a townsman. The Arab has built his social structure on the Quran, which inculcates absolutism, aristocracy, theocracy. The Berber, despite his nominal Mohammedanism, is a democratic with his Jimna or Wittimat and Kanun or unwritten code called the Magna Carta. Okay? This is very important to understand that the same people that they call the Anglo-Saxons, or the English people, are actually, in fact, and indeed, all the Berbers. How we know? Let's go back to the Anglo-Saxon government real quick. Look up Witten and read what it says. Now look to your left. Anglo-Saxon kings of Witten. Biblical scene. You hear that? The biblical scene is illustrated in the Old English Hexapla, meaning the 5 books of your Bible, portraying Pharaoh in court session after passing judgment on his chief baker and chief cupbearer. Okay? That's very, very, very important because we're talking about Berbers in the biblical time because the government of the Berbers was called Witan, meaning what? Wise men, which was a king council in Anglo-Saxon government of England from before the 7th century until the 11th century and comprised of important noblemen, including aldermen, thanes, and bishops. Meeting of Witten were sometimes called Witten Mont. If everyone who's watching today or will be watching understands that, which I know Brother Nooley does, please give me a thumbs up in the chat line. I know it's going to hurt a lot of people's feelings, but hey, truth has to be told. All right. Let's go back here. Now we go back to the Quran. Right? So it says in the Quran, Holy Circle 7 Quran, it's written in English, y'all. It's not written in Arabic because Moorish should be understanding God in the language that God spoke to him, which is in Arabic. For the simple reason that you are not speaking Arabic and you're speaking English, you must be speaking the language of the English God, which is English, and interpreted the way God was supposed to be interpreted based upon that conversation. Okay? The glory of the king is the wealth of his people. His power and dominion rests on the hearts of his subjects. The mind of a great prince is exalted with the grandeur of his situation. He abhors high things and searches for the business worthy of his power. He calls together the wise men, Witten, Berbers of his kingdom. He consulted amongst them with freedom and heareth the opinion of them all. He looks among his people with discernment. He discovers the abilities of men and employs them according to their merits. Okay? This is called nobility. Okay? Nobility. His magistrates are just. This is the king's court or the king's bench. His ministers are wise. The favors of his bosom deceiveth him not. He smiles on the arts and they flourishes the science improvements beneath the culture of his hand. All of this is in English. With the learned and indigenous he delighteth himself. He kindles in their breast emulation, and the glory of his kingdom is exalted by their labor. This is based upon the tenure that you're giving from the one who conveyed it to you based off the process called library of season. The spirit of the merchants who extended his commerce, the skill of the farmer who enriches his lands, the ingenuity of the artist, the improvement of the scholar, all these honors with his favor and reward us with his bounty. He planted new colonies. We're talking about colonies, brothers and sisters. We're talking about colonies. So put this situation at the time of the colonies in 1702. It wasn't under the Moorish American or the Moroccan Empire, nor were they speaking Arabic, which is the language of the Arabs. They were speaking English because the law in that land at the time, in this land at the time of the colony, was under the common law. So the colonies that were planted in those colonies under the common law was by the King of England, the same person we're talking about in this whole chapter. He planted new colonies, he built strong ships, he opened rivers for conveniences, he formed harbors for safety, his people abound in riches, and the strength of his kingdom increases. He frames his statute with equity and wisdom, i.e., English statute, English law, English constitution, English president, okay? Very important. He frames his statute with equity and wisdom. His subjects enjoy the fruits of their labor and security, and their happiness consists of the observance of the law. Why? Because it said it in the preamble. We, the people of the state of New Jersey and Almighty God, granted us from generation to generation the preservation of our ability to be able to acquire property, possess property, and protect that property. What property was that? The land which is in question. Okay? He founded his judgment on the principles of mercy, but punished the offenders in his strict and impartial. His ears are open. His ears are open to the complaints of his subjects. He restrains the hands of their oppressors and delivers them from their tyranny. His people therefore look up to him as a father. This is called Father of the Nations. Ferenc Patriarch. Okay, right now that's the Attorney General. Okay, it should be the king or officer who works for the king. All right, their affection unto him begetteth his breast of love of the public. The security of their happiness is the object of his care. No murmurs against him arise in their hearts, and the machination of his enemies in danger not to stay. That's very, very important for you to understand. Verse 18, in closing of this this chapter. His subjects are faithful and firm in his cause. They stand in his defense as a wall of brass. The army of tyrants flieth before them as chaff before the wind. Security and peace bless the dwelling of his people, and the glory and strength encircle his throne forever. This is very important in regards to the topic tonight that Taj is talking about, unum sanctum Lucifer. Once again, unum sanctum Lucifer. So now let's go into the video. We're going to watch the video, listen to what he got to say, and then we're going to stop it at certain points in the video and break down some of the things that he's discussing or talking about, but don't make clear to the people. Like I said, once again, I'm going to get a lot of dislikes about this video, but it's not for the sake of you. It's for the sake of the law. Here we go.
He made that speech and he exposed that the Constitution comes from Muslim law. Is what is told to you is the president. That's the praetor representative, CEO, for the corporation that is actually owned by Rome and the Khazarian Mafia. The Khazarian Mafia is commonly referred to as Jews, Jewish lobbies. That's the real politics. And when one is not aware of that, your concepts are easily guided by whatever narrative they present to you. But keep in mind what I just said to you is known by all politicians, not some, all, that are what you call made men and made women. We're not talking about people necessarily that come up as councilmen and councilwomen in your local government. Some of them, but all and any of them who are either Eastern Stars, Daughters of the American Revolution, if you're dealing with Europeans, Masons, etc., they all know this. This is why a lot of times people get uncomfortable when Moors come around and start talking openly things that they have held secret to their own power. And this is also why many of the people, when you get into the real metaphysics and the real geopolitics, it makes them uncomfortable.
Very
and it's also why they become very oppressive, suppressive, and immediately attack the Constitution for the United States with the right of speech, because actually their Constitution doesn't come from them. It came from Muslim law.
Stop. If it came from Muslim law and the law was written by Allah for Muslims or whatever name they got for them, then why is it in English? Okay? They said the Constitution comes from Muslim law, but it's written in English. So how are the English people supposed to take that? Okay? When the very language he's speaking in English, no disrespect to the brother or anybody who claims that the Constitution comes from Muslim law, because it does not come from Muslim law. You don't see the Constitution over here, over in Arabia. You do not see it. If it does, somebody please let me know. So once again, when you read the Constitution of the United States of America, it don't even mention God in the Constitution of the United States. First of all, let's just look at it. Let's look at it first. Constitution of the United States, 1787. See, majority of you just get on the screen and just listen and don't question anything. It's the blind leading the blind, okay? It's the blind leading the blind. We the people. This is the Constitution. Just the preamble. And this is in 1787, okay? Prior to 1787, the law that was there was the Common Law of England. We go to Article 18 of the 1776 Constitution. The Common Law of England was there even under the occupation of the people they call now we the people, okay? And guiding in the picture. It says, we the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessing of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America. So if the Constitution for the United States comes from Muslim law, then that means that you are the people they're talking about. But I don't see God or Allah mentioned in anywhere in the preamble. Allah is not mentioned anywhere, or God is not mentioned anywhere, because at this time there was a separation of church and state. And there was no separation of church and state. And I'm pretty sure Muslims don't go to church, okay? It was a separation of church, state and mosque. It didn't say that. It says a separation of church and state. So if we, the people of the United States, was ordained by Muslim law, then the language should be reading here should be written in English. That's point one, okay? Let's go to New Jersey's Constitution and look at that real quick. to see what the preamble said. So they're not even concerned about your religious liberty according to that Constitution, if y'all wrote it. You're not concerned about the civil and religious liberties of the people because it didn't say it in the preamble. Anything the 1947 Constitution says is going to be backed up by the Constitution that preceded them. Okay? The 1947 Constitution of New Jersey. Okay? Very important. This was in the gymnasium of Rutgers University that was chartered by the Provincial Congress, not the Provincial Congress, the party itself, the legislative branch under, what's his name, Governor Driscoll, first Governor Driscoll. All right, we see here in the preamble, let me blow this up for y'all so y'all can see this. Everybody get that Constitution. You don't want to get the United States Constitution because God is nowhere in the picture. Okay? Anybody's God for that matter. Everybody read the preamble. We're talking about we the people of the state of New Jersey, not we the state of the state of New Jersey, but we the people of the state of New Jersey are grateful to the Almighty God. So that's a contract, that's a compact, that's a solemn oath between the Almighty God and the people. And the language we're reading this in is in English, going back to the time of the conversation between Almighty God and we the people. Okay? And I don't see Islam or Muslim law or none of that here. And this is for not just for civil rights, but religious rights and liberties. You didn't see that in the United States Constitution, so you wasn't concerned about religious liberties. All right? Let alone civil liberties, because if you ain't got no religious liberties, you ain't gonna have no civil liberties, because pretty much it ain't gonna be a state of liberty, a civilness, okay? So it says, we the people of the state of New Jersey, and grateful to Almighty God for the civil and religious liberties which he has so long permitted us to enjoy, and looking to him, the same God, for his blessing upon our endeavors to secure the transmit the same unimpaired to succeeding generations and do ordain and establish this Constitution. So this compact or contract between the Almighty God and we the people of the state of New Jersey, before it was called the state of New Jersey, apparently the language they were speaking was English. So it must have been the language of the people, which at that time, prior to 1066, they were called Berbers, because they are the Anglo-Saxon Berbers, misnomer as English people, because this is the language that we speak today, okay? And they had an unimpaired contract to succeed for succeeding generations as confirmed by the Constitution of 1947, the Constitution of 1844, and it starts off the first article of the rights granted by God to the people of the state of New Jersey, and not the state for the state of New Jersey, that all persons are by nature free and independent and have certain natural and unalienable rights. Unalienable versus alienable. We just want to play around with that term, alienable and unalienable. You use it too loosely, okay? We're talking about property rights, right? Because it says among which are those of enjoying and defending life, liberty, of acquiring, possession, protecting property, and pursuing and obtaining safety and happiness. This is called a birthright or an inheritance based upon the language of the birthright inheritance from the grantor to the grantee, which means you, if you're an Englishman, because the conversation that is having or being communicated by is in English. Going back to the time where Almighty God was having a conversation with the people before it was called the state of New Jersey, and all the way up to 1947 Constitution, in which they still go by in this present day. Okay? And from Article 1 to Article 10 protects that unalienable, natural, independent, free right that you all have as English people, okay, based upon the supreme law of the land which you're reading, okay? So the Constitution of New Jersey or the Constitution of any state within the United States did not originate from Muslim law. Okay? Go back to the video.
And a lot of people don't know that. So people who don't know that think that the Constitution for the United States came from hybrid Europeans. No, it came from Moors. And this is why you'll see when you go into the congressional records and you start going into the journals, you'll see that the persons that they refer to as the founding fathers all had Qurans. And also, when Barack H. Obama was in office, he made mention when he did that speech in Cairo, he made that speech and he exposed that the Constitution come from Muslim law. And while people know that, you'll notice that a lot of people don't emphasize that, if you can. But the purpose of not exposing some of that history has to do with them psychologically separating us from the land, so they would not have obligation to the treaty, which supersedes the Constitution, and it expresses the truth of the supreme law, which you already know. Now, that's another reason why it's important for the people to be reminded of what's going on today. Now, as we've talked over the House, Reawakening Minds for years, Dr. G, as you recall, I told you 8 years ago that Donald Trump was assigned, right? And I always qualify it by reminding people that that does not mean I'm supporting him. I'm trying to get people to pay attention to him and what he does, because he's put in place to do a lot of the dissolution of the corporate operations that the people thought was a country, when it's actually the dissolution on certain levels of the United States Corporation Company and the frauds that the people who own it, etc., have committed on the planet. And the only thing that holds this thing together, that maintains their power, is their military. And the fact that they've infiltrated almost all of the governments on the planet. Are we clear? And that all of the trustees who you know as congressmen and congresswomen, all of them have within their offices what you would call the invisible desk. And the invisible desk of every congressman and congresswoman's office under the United States Corporation Company has a representative from Israel. And this is why I always remind people. So if you really want to know the policies that seem to always be in conflict of what they're doing to us, or what they're doing in occupied Palestine, or when you unpeel the onions and you start looking at Ukraine, pay attention to what Netanyahu says, and then you'll understand the president's agenda. Because they're really the president of the corporation. See, this is what people don't understand. As long as people keep thinking country in the concept that they've been trained, the hybrids will control the narrative. And they're desperate now because, as we've been telling the people for the last 20 years, that the nations would stop buying their treasury bonds. Then you would have a feedback loop. That's already it's been in play, but it's manifesting now that the average everyday person who has not necessarily been listening to us, it's now becoming apparent to them that even the blind can see it.
One second, y'all.
And most of the people that don't see it is because they don't.
One second.
Want to see it. or because they have investment in the system, and in the heart of hearts they know that their securities investments are kind of like dead, if you would like to put it in layman's terms.
I'm looking at something, because I started, doing the research, and I was going to add some of what I found, some fascinating stuff. So, someone's going to be in the book, but I want to share this because what it talks about is the fact that, when we were in control, we didn't. When we say it's our land, it's not our land devoid of the fact that it's Gaia, Mother Earth's land, that we have stewardship over the land, and that we have to protect that land and so forth. So we lived like that. But when they came in, Rome twisted usufruct. So usufruct wasn't necessarily a bad thing when we were doing it, using the land that Mother Earth, Gaia, whoever created, in the same manner, using it, benefited from it, but not destroying.
He said Midgard. He said Midgard. Now, majority of the people, of all the people who listen to him, will believe that, okay? Will actually believe that. So let's look at the word usufruct, okay? So we'll be on the same page with what he's talking about, because the majority of you have no clue. Usufruct. These are all property terms because they're using the words loosely. How are you going to have the rights or the ability to be able to have the right of reversion or management of your estate if you don't know the proper terms and how to apply the terms that you're using? Okay, especially when it don't revert to Muslim law. Okay, usufruct is not a law that derives from Muslim law, nor Roman law. Okay, it was Romans who invaded the people who were using the law or created the law of usufruct, which means the law limiting the use of property that belongs to someone else. Okay, so usufruct is a limited real right found in civil law, and it originated from religious law. Okay, and mixed jurisdictions that united the two property interests of uses. Okay, very important for you to understand that. All right. Usufruct is either granted in severally or held in common ownership, as long as the property is not damaged or destroyed. The third civilian property interest in abuseless literary abuse, the right to alienate the thing possessed, is either by consuming or destroying it. Okay, this is called waste for profit. This is also called this is where the statutes of Jewry come from, passed by King Edward III. Okay, who passed the laws against alienation of property. We call it Quint Imperatorus, okay? Terranum, His Majesty laws on the buying and the selling of land, okay? This is versus fee simple estates or feetel estates. Feetel estates and intel estates are estates for heirs, okay, of the body. Fee simple estate is just for anybody, okay? Which originates in what they call life estates, the feasible estates, future estates, which are all subject to right of reentry because they are called cloudy titles or defective titles. Okay, when the title is defective, that means there's a cloud on it, which means that it needs to be quieted. This is the abstract story about Jesus coming in the clouds and with heaven and bringing heaven on earth. Okay, this is where that story comes from. So we're talking about usufruct, the law governing the use of property that's not yours. This is called an easement, a right of easement. How many of you ever heard of that word? The right of easement. Okay, I think I've seen it up here. Where did I see it at? Right here. Non-possessory interest. A non-possessory interest in land is a term of property law to describe any of the categories of right held by one person to use land that is in the possession of another. Everyone understands that, because if you don't, you'll never understand your inheritance. Okay? This land is governed under what we call allodial land. Okay? Allodial land. Allodial land is land that's indefeasible, which means it's free and clear from any encumbrances from whatsoever. Okay, and it's subject to the grantor, the one who owns the allodial land, to convey it to a grantee, such as an heir, to fetail, because if it is an heir, it has to go by way of lottery of season to the process of lottery of law versus lottery of deed. Okay, lottery of deed is how most life estates are handed down, which are indefeasible. Why? Because they are defective. They got clouds on them. Okay, very important to understand that. So this is these type of possessions are known as adverse possession right here. Adverse possession by way of a deed, okay? By way of a deed. So this is the law governing usufruct, okay? This is the law governing usufruct. Part of the common law, not part of Muslim law or Moorish law. It says my common law. I hope you all understand that. If anybody knows Todd Tariq's phone number, you need to give him a call. Okay? Usufruct is also called the Statutes of Uses. Let's look at that real quick. Passed by Henry VIII of the House of Tudors of the Lancaster branch, a cadet branch from the Lancaster branch of the cadet branch of the Angevin crown of the Plantagenet crown, which we are the heirs of, because we are heirs of Godfrey, the fifth Count of Anjou, son of Fulk, ruler of Jerusalem, where my surname Jefferson descends down from, son of Godfrey. The Statute of Uses by Henry VIII was an act of the Parliament of England, not an act of the Muslim Empire or the or whatever they call themselves or whatever government they function under. This was an act of Parliament of England enacted in the 16th century that restricted the application of uses in English property law. The statute ended the practice of creating uses in real property by changing it to pure equitable to beneficiaries only and to absolute ownership with the right of what they once said for themselves, possession. So the law of usufruct is also called the law of the statute of uses. All right. Prior to that, it was called the statute of jury. Okay. It was called the statute of jury, passed by Edward I and Plantagenet King. All right. Very important for you to understand that. Statute of jury. This is where the statute of uses come from. Let's look at that real quick. This is what Todd should be talking about. The Statute of Jury was a statute enacted by Edward I of England in 1275. It placed a number of restrictions on Jews of England, most notably outlawing the practice of usury. Usury, that's very important. Usury or usufruct, whatever name you choose, it originally go back to Edward I, the son of Henry III, the son of John, going back to the Magna Carta, okay? Going all the way back to the Magna Carta, which involves the topic of unum sanctum, okay? That involves the subject of unum sanctum. We already discussed usufruct. Now we're going to discuss unum sanctum because apparently Taj Tariq used both words, unum sanctum and usufruct, but did not explain the origin of where they come from because he does not have a clue. Okay? He does not have a clue. Let's go back to the video.
A reminder to the people that this particular earth, which is not the only one, Midgard.
Yeah, left
Midgard. Okay,
Yeah,
so Midgard.
now Gaia is not improper either because it's also called that, but it's also Midgard. And it's important to know it because we need what part of our conversations with the people it is our responsibility, those who know, to get our people more erudite in real geopolitics and get them farther away from the controlled connotative linguistic language that's expressed in civic interchange.
Now check this out, y'all. I just caught on to something. He keeps talking about Midgard, okay? That story comes from Frankish, Nordic talking, okay? Which goes into the history dealing with the Frankish kings, okay? The Frankish kings who were warring with the Anglo-Saxons, okay? So apparently Taz knows more than he's talking about in regards to the origin of Uno Sanctum and Usufruct, because if you're making reference to Midgard, Midgard is symbolic of earth, and Asgard is symbolic of heaven, okay, where the Asgardians live, okay, such as Thor, Odin, Loki, all these Nordic gods, okay? And he making reference to Nordic terms, but not making reference to the history of the Nordic people, which are clearly Frankish people, okay? Roman Catholic, I might add, which we're going to talk about once we discuss the term Uno Sanctum, okay? Very important.
Right.
Part of which is part of the scatterbrain operations that has its root in the Southern education operations that became later the General Education Board in 1902, controlled by Khazarian Mafia, which you will know as Rothschild, which means Red Shield,
He in left
and
field,
the
y'all.
Gates family, Frederick T. Gates, and to institute operationally animal husbandry training, under the guise of erudition, and it's called education. Education is not wrong because it draws out, but what that is a neutered aspect of erudition. And we don't want to get into that necessarily, but that must be comprehended because the people need to understand that in the geopolitical realm, one of the reasons that they always have what you would call non-transparent meetings or private meetings, etc., is because in private, they don't talk like they talk to the people when they're telling them this, that, and the other about economics and everything. No different than the fact that the masses, one of the problems that the masses still have today is not knowing that finance and financial weaponry is not in the concept that they're told. So what you see going on in the world right now is financial wars. The operations of the trade from the Unum Sanctum operators of the U.S. corporation company has always been financial weaponry.
Okay, so he keeps talking about Unum Sanctum and has not dived not one bit into where it actually stems from. Okay, I have a problem with that, a very big problem with that, because you keep referring to them as corporations. Okay, so let's deal with that real quick. Let's deal with that real quick. See what the Supreme Court has to say about that. Chisholm versus Georgia, 1793 case. United States Supreme Court. Decided February 19, 1793. Now, this mentions Edward I, a Plantagenet king. I'm going to go right to him. Now, what the hell, and this is a case dealing with bringing suits against the state, okay, for torts against the state, tort acts. for violating the Constitution. Okay? For violating the Constitution. Matter of fact, let's read a little bit right quick. All right. Who can actually sue these people? To Iredell Justice. This great cause comes before the court on a motion by who? The Attorney General, that an order be made by the court to the following effect. That unless the state of Georgia shall, after reasonable notice of this motion, cause an appearance to be entered on behalf of the state on the fourth day of the next term, or so called, this is called a call warranto, or order to show cause. That's a prerogative of the Crown. To show cause to the contrary, why judgment should be entered for the plaintiff and a writ of inquiry and should be awarded. Okay? Before such an order be made, it is proper that this court should be satisfied and has cognizance of the suit. For to be sure, we ought not to enter in conditional judgment, which this would be. In a case where we were not fully persuaded, we had the authority to actually be able to do so. Okay? So they question their own authority. This is the first incident where the important question involved in this case has come regularly before this court. In Maryland case, it did not, because the Attorney General of the state volunteer appeared. We do not, therefore, without greatest impropriety, have taken up the question suddenly. That case has since been compromised, but had it proceeded to trial and the verdict had been given for the plaintiff, it would have been our duty, previous to our giving judgment, to have well considered whether we were warranted in giving it as well. I had this great doubt upon my mind, and should in such case have proposed a discussion on such a subject. On such a subject. Those doubts have increased since and after the fullest consideration I have been able to bestow on the subject. And the most respectful attention to the able argument of the Attorney General, I am now decidedly of opinion that no such action as this before the court can legally be maintained. The action is an action of assumption, which means to trespass. An action of trespass. This is called a tort, a common law tort. The particular question then asked, the particular question then before the court is, will an action of trespass lie against a state? Let me just charge my phone. So will an action of trespass lie against the state? This particular question then before the court is, will an action of something lie against the state? The particular question abstracted from the general one, whether a state can in any sense be sued, I took the liberty to propose to the consideration of the Attorney General last term. I did so because I have often found a great deal of confusion to arise from taking too large of a view at once. And I had found myself embarrassed on this very subject until I considered the abstract question itself. The Attorney General had spoken to it in reference to my request, as he had been pleased to intimate, but he had spoken to the particular question, slightly conceiving it to be involved in the general one. And after establishing, as he thought, that point, he seemed to consider the other following, of course. He expressed indeed some doubt how to prove what appeared so plain. It seemed to him, if I could recollect right, to depend principally on the solution of this simple question: can a state assume? But the Attorney General must know that in England, certain judicial proceedings not inconsistent with the sovereignty may take place against the Crown, but that an action of something will not lie. Yet surely the king can assume as well as the state. So can the United States themselves, as well as the state in the Union. Yet the Attorney General himself has taken some pains to show that no action whatever is maintainable against the United States. I should therefore confine myself as much as possible to the particular question before the court. Though everything I have to say upon it will affect every kind of suit, the object of which is to compel the payment of money by the state, i.e., paying the debt. The question, as before I observed, is will an action of tort lie against a state? If it will, it must be in virtue of the Constitution of the United States and some law of Congress conformable thereto. The part of the Constitution concerning judicial power is as follows. The judicial power shall extend to cases in law and equity arising under the Constitution, the law of the United States, treaties made or which should be made under their authority to all cases affecting ambassadors or other public ministers and consuls, to all cases admiralty and maritime jurisdiction, to controversies to which the United States should be a party, to controversy between two or more states, between a state and a citizen of another state, between citizens of different states, between citizens of the same state, claiming land under the grants of different states, and between states or citizens thereof and the foreign state citizens are subject. This is very important to understand because this deals with diversity of jurisdiction in regards to states and other states within the United States versus citizens of the United States, okay? Very important. This all goes back to the 1787 Constitution of we the people and their citizens, as well as the state's constitution involving their citizens, if they have citizens, according to the term what a citizen denote to, okay? Very important. Let's go here now with this case so we can go back to the video. It mentioned Edward the First. Let me just find it. It ain't too far from here. Right here. And you have to go too far. Everyone listen. This is how you know this is England. Okay? The only principle of law then that can be regarded are those common to all states. Did y'all hear that? Did y'all hear that? The only principle of law then that can be regarded are those common to all of the states. It's not Moorish law. It's not Muslim law. The Constitution is not rooted in Muslim law or Moorish law. It's rooted in common law, what is properly termed the common law, a law which I presume is the groundwork of the laws in every state within the Union. Did you hear that, y'all? And which I consider so far as it is applicable to the peculiar circumstances of the country, and where no special act of legislation controls it to be enforced in each state as it existed in England, unalterated by any statute at the time of the first settlement of this country. What more proof do y'all need? What more proof do you need than this case right here? This is a lawsuit waiting to happen. Is already in action by your king. I already did this, okay? So it says, I know of none such which I can effect in this case, but those that are derived from what is properly termed the common law. The same common law that you see in New Jersey's Constitution, 1844, 1947, between English people and what? The English God, okay? Which was right here on earth. It says, a law which I presume is the groundwork, the law in every state of the Union, and which I consider so far as it is applicable to the peculiar circumstances of the country, where no special act of legislation controls it, and to be enforced in each state as existed in England as unalterated and by any statute. At the time of the first settlement of this country. So when the colonization started in this country, the only law in this country was the common law of England, okay? The common law of England. The statutes of England that are enforced in America differ perhaps in all states, and therefore it is probable that the common law in each is in some respect a little different. But in certain that in regards to any common law principle which can influence the question before us, no alteration has been made by any statute which could occasion the least material differences or have any partial effect. No other part of the common law of England, it appears to me, can have any reference to this subject but that part of which prescribes remedies against the crown. Did you hear that, y'all? Against the crown. Every state in the Union, in every instance where its sovereignty has been delegated to the United States, are considered to be a completely sovereign as the United States are in respect to the power surrendered. What power surrendered? That's the power surrendered back to the states. The United States are sovereign as to all the powers of the government actually surrendered. Each state in the Union is sovereign as to all the powers reserved. It must necessarily be so, because the United States have no claim to any authority but such as the states have surrendered to them. Of course, that part not surrendered must remain as it did before, untampered, undiluted, etc. All right, let's go a little further. Let's find Edward the First. Where is he at? We're close. Yeah. Yeah. Where is he at? Here we go. Listen, y'all. Listen. If therefore no new remedy be provided, as plainly in this case, okay, as plainly in this case, and consequently we have no other rule to govern us but the principles of the pre-existed laws, meaning the laws that were already there before those laws became in question, which must remain in force till superseded by others, then it is incumbent upon us to inquire whether, previous to the adoption of the Constitution, which period or the period of passing the laws in respect to the object of this inquiry is perfectly equal. An action of the nature like this before the court could have been maintained against one of the states in the Union upon the principles of the common law, not Moorish law, not Muslim law, which I have shown to be alone applicable. If it could, I think it's now maintainable here. If it could not, I think as the law stands at present, it is not maintainable, whatever opinion may be entertained upon the construction of the Constitution as to the power of Congress to authorize such a one. Now, I presume it will not be denied that in every state of the Union previous to the adoption of the Constitution, the only common law principle in regards to suits that were in any manner admissible in respect to the claim against the state were those which in England, applying to claims against the crown, applying to claims against the crown, or could be at any period from which the common law, as enforced in America, could be derived. I believe that it could be called by a petition of right. It is stated indeed in Common Digest 105 that until the time of Edward I, the king might have been sued in all actions as a common person, as some authorities are cited. For that position, though, is even to be stated to be some doubt. But the same authority adds, but now none can have an action against the king, but one shall be put to sue by him by petition. So do you see it? We see in Chittum versus Georgia, it talks about the right to petition the king, which is the crown, representation of the crown on behalf of you being injured by the state under the common law of England. It's right here for you, undiluted. All right. Now let's deal with corporations. Since Tyler was talking about corporations, let's go there. Talks about contract, everything right here. In this case, brothers and sisters, right here. Listen and learn. There is no other part of the common law besides that which I have considered, which can by any person be pretended in any manner to apply to this case, but that which concerns corporation. Did you hear that? The applicability of this, the Attorney General, with great candor, has expressly waived. I wonder why. I wonder why he waived the argument on action brought against the state, which is in actionality a corporation. As Todd said, the applicability of this Attorney General with great candor has expressly waived, but as it may be urged on other occasions, and I wish to give the fullest satisfaction, I will say a few words to that doctrine. Suppose, therefore, it should be objected that the reason I have now used it is not conclusive, because inasmuch as a state is made subject to the judicial power of Congress, its sovereignty must not stand in the way of the proper exercise of that power. And therefore, in all such cases, though in no other, a state can only be considered as a subordinate corporation merely. One, a corporation merely. Y'all heard that? He's right. They're a corporation. I answer first that this construction can only be allowed at the utmost upon the supposition that the judicial authority of the United States, as it respects states, cannot be effectuated without proceeding against them in that light. A position I by no means admit. Second, that according to the principles I have supported in this argument, admitting that states ought to be so considered for that purposes, an act of the legislature is necessary to give effect to such construction, unless the old doctrine concerning corporation will naturally apply to this particular case. And third, that as it is evident that the act of Congress has not made any special provisions in this case grounded on any such construction, so it is to my mind perfectly clear that we have no authority upon any supposed analogy between the two cases to apply the common doctrine concerning corporation to the important cases now before this court. So they didn't want to apply the origin of corporation to this case in regard to the corporation that exists at the particular time, because it did not apply to them. Okay, it only applied to our corporation called the Corporation Soul, the English Third Temple Church of England. How we know it? Let's read it. I take it for granted that when any part of an ancient law is to be applied to a new case, the circumstances of the new case must agree in all essential points with the circumstances of the old cases to which the ancient law was formally appropriated. This is called identical and privity. Okay? Identical and privity. Everyone needs to look that word up. Now, there are, in my opinion, the most essential differences between the old cases of corporation to which the law intimated has reference, and the great extraordinary cases of states separately possessing as to everything simply related to themselves the fullest power of sovereignty, and yet in some other defined particulars subject to a superior power compound out of themselves for the common welfare of the whole. The only law concerning corporations to which I conceive the least reference is to be had in the common law of England on that subject. Okay, this is where we come in the picture. I need not repeat the observation I made in respect to the operation of the law in this country. The word corporation has a more extensive meaning than the people generally are aware of, where in this country. Okay? in this country. Everyone else know it, but the people in this country. The word corporation is, in its larger sense, has a more extensive meaning than the people generally are aware of. And anybody politics, so or aggregate, whether its power be restricted or transcended, in this sense, is a corporation. So a king accordingly is what? A corporation. All right? In England, it's called a corporation. Once again, the king accordingly in England is called a corporation. It's the parliament itself. In this extensive sense, not only each state singly, but even the United States may without impropriety be termed a corporation, and I have therefore, in contradiction to the larger and indefinite term, used the term a subordinate corporation, meaning to refer to such only as alone capable of the slightest application for the purpose of the objection, whose creation and whose powers are limited by what? The law, the statute, i.e. the English statute. We must comprehend that. Everyone understands that? Please give me a thumbs up. Let's go back to the video.
Money. The people, like we've been telling the people over and over again, they haven't been allowed to have money. This is why, and no different than the perpetration of the quote unquote electrical impulse input output distribution control containment is called currency. It's biology. Now, no, I'm talking political. I'm talking real politics, real civil politics. Because the fact that we're coming on now, even though, you know, Prime Minister, you're not ready to, you know, but she's always looking out for me. Right. But it's because the people are in trouble more than they think they are right now.
Well said, brother. No, the fact.
And like you've always said, and it's really true, no one's coming to save us.
You heard that? No one coming to save you.
More erudite people who will, and it's difficult, I recognize it's difficult to get out of their emotions, which is difficult because we're trained to cater to our emotions. It's not unnatural, but we're also trained. In other words, everything relative to human biology has been weaponized against us. And not.
Now he's into biology. He ain't said one thing about usufruct and nothing about uno sanctum. Okay? He said nothing whatsoever. Okay? And all that pertains to the birthright of inheritance of the people he's so-called trying to explain this information to. But he don't understand it because he don't speak the language of the English people. Nor do he understand the language of the English people, or else he would be English. Okay? So these people are sick in the head. Sick in the head. Okay?
Not being aware of it is part of the danger, if you get the point. And it's sort of like when you're aware of something, even it's not even an issue of agreement or not agreement. It's an issue of once you understand what you're dealing with, whether you like it or not, you spend less time what you would call dealing in scatterbrain operations, which is a military operation, and design. That's not an opinion. The people who are under the governing auspices of the Circle Church and Chancery operatives of the bar, British Accredited Registry, that actually are the trustees for the United States Corporation Company, faced to the public by what is known as congressmen and senators for the United States Corporation Company, all know this, and they use this. All their operations between each other is, in layman's term, called good cop, bad cop operations, where you think they're actually opposed to each other and they're operating in partnership to drain the carcass of humanity, which you know as exploitation and colonization, that the people keep forgetting that we're colonized. Usufructuary is colonization essence.
Now let's qualify that, because it's in the terms of how they use it. When it had its original,
the meaning is given to you mildly so that you don't look beyond the veil.
Also, can we say that then the word the perfect is fruit or fruit, and so it's about the fruit.
Another good word for right now. That's because I will try to lean to things that are researchable in the records, that they will recognize that what is available to them. As an example, when we tell people to read the flash drive with
going back to that flash drive. See, talking about usufruct, but I have no clue of what it actually means because they don't understand the common law. Okay? So this is why you're talking about biology. This is why you're talking about Midgard. Okay? This is why you're talking about all these things that has nothing to do with the term unum sanctum or usufruct at all. Okay? And they got 40.6 thousand subscribers. Okay? Claiming they understand the agreement between God and the people. And based upon the conversation, they ain't even in the conversation. They don't have a birthright according to the Constitution. Okay? According to the supreme law of the land, which I just qualified, it only involves the English people and the English God. Okay? The English people and the English God. I don't know how to make this any clearer. Okay? We know that God's son was named Jesus, okay? God's name was named Jesus, okay? According to them. We call him King Edgar the Peaceful, okay? Very important. King Edgar the Peaceful was king of the Anglo-Saxons, okay? Yes, he was. He was the one who reformed the English bent down reform as a result of what existed through the Gregorian mission of the Anglo-Saxon into what they call Roman Catholic Christianity as a result of those laws passed by the Pope under what they call unum sanctum. Okay? Unum sanctum, which caused the usufruct, okay, of use of property that did not belong to them. Okay? So let's look at the term unum sanctum. Okay? All right? Let's look at the term unum sanctum. We look at the term usufruct, which means the law governing easement, the right of and use of possession of something that you don't own. Okay? So when we look up the word unum sanctum, first let's look at Jesus' bloodline. All right? I did a lesson on Mary Magdalene, the Holy Grail. I did a lesson on the Holy Shroud. I did a lesson on all this, okay? All this connected to the history concerning the ancestry of Jesus, okay? Which is talking about King Edgar the Peaceful, because Mary was brought to England, okay? In Somerset, all right? We must understand this story has an abstract story and a concrete story, okay? It's all connected to the history concerning the Merovingians, okay, and the Anglo-Saxon. The Anglo-Saxon are the English kings, and the Merovingians are the Frankish kings. This is why Taj Tariq keep referring to the Frankish mythical lords: Odin, Thor, Midgard, Asgard. Okay, very, very important to understand that. It says here, Mary Magdalene goes to France after crucifixion carrying a child Jesus, who would originate a lineage that centuries later would connect them to or unite them with the Merovingian rulers of the early Frankish kingdoms, from whom they traced their descent into medieval dynasties that were almost exterminated by the Albigensian crusade against the Cathars. Okay? The Albigensian crusade against the Cathars. I did a lesson on this already, and these involved the English and Frankish kings, and who united and unified as a result of marriages. Okay? Yes, the Frankish and English kings were married. This gets into what we call the Spanish succession wars. This is what resulted in the Spanish succession wars, the Spanish conquest. All this goes back to what we call What crusade was that? The Castilian Crusade. It originated from the Castilian Crusade, which originated from what we call the 100-Year War, which resulted from the war against the Anglo-Saxon kings under Edward I's descendants, called the what we call the War of the Roses or the 100-Year Wars. Let's do that. Let's talk about this, okay? Let's go and check out Unum Sanctum, okay? But before that, we check out Unum Sanctum. Let's check that out, Unum Sanctum. Since Charles didn't do that. Unum Sanctum is a papal bull that was issued by Pope Boniface VIII against Frankish King Philip IV. Okay? You probably don't know nothing about that. Todd don't know nothing about this. Okay? Unum Sanctum is a papal bull by Pope Boniface VIII on 18th November 1302. It laid down dogmatic propositions on the unity of the Roman Catholic Church. This goes back to Augustine of Hippo and Pope Leo the 14th, who just became Pope of the Roman Catholic Church, is from the Augustine Friary, okay? That goes back to Augustine of Hippo, which goes back to the history of Roman Catholic influence in Carthage dealing with the Berbers, okay? Very important to understand that. Subject: relation between the Catholic Church and the state. Written in what? English, okay? The subject of the Unum Sanctum is relationship between the Catholic Church and the state. Let's look at that real quick. The relationship between the Catholic Church and the state. This goes into the 1st century AD. Okay? 1st century AD. Let's see. This is where King James got his stuff from. The Divine Right of Kings. This is where Henry VIII got his stuff from. The Divine Right of Kings. Okay? This goes back to biblical times. The relationship between the Catholic Church and the state have been constantly evolving from various forms of government, some of them controversial in retrospect. In its history, the church has had a deal with various concepts and systems of governance from the Roman Empire. This is why we had the English Town reform by Jesus Christ, King Edgar the Peaceful, okay, in 959. Very important for you to understand that. Catholicism and the Roman Empire, emperors. Right? Very important. Check it out. Christianity emerged in the first century as one of the many new religions in the Roman Empire. Early Christians were persecuted as early as 64 AD, Annos Dominius, which means in the year of our Lord. That's not the year we use for us. For us, 1 AD is the year 951 AD, Annos Dominius, which is according to the Berber calendar, because at this time, ain't no English calendars existing, okay? Let's just prove that for the record. Let's go to 1 AD. This is how Todd should be teaching, or anybody for that matter. AD, Annos Dominius, 1st century, brothers and sisters. Estimated for the world population by AD 170 to 300 million. We ain't concerned about that. Let's look at the calendar. Because what I say, he who writes your book sets your timeline. Time never was, we were not. The life of time begin, the time will come when we will be no more. So we got to make sure that we tell our own story about when we were and when we became and when we didn't exist. We still existed, because we can go to the Constitution for that. We go back to God Almighty and the conversation he had with the people right here in New Jersey, okay? We see AD, Annos Dominius, in the year of our Lord, is in the Berber year, 951, okay? There is no English reading out year at this time, okay? So all the Anglo-Saxons are Berbers, okay? We didn't become English Berbers till the year 1066. How I know it? Let's look up the year 1066, or better yet, 1065. Ten 66 is the year William the Conqueror invaded England. Run and tell that. (1066). The Berber year is what? 2016. And all of a sudden now, you got an English speaking now year. William the Conqueror, William the Bastard invades England and becomes the first Norman, Frankish, Vikish king that Taj talk about. The Northmen, Odin, Thor, Loki. All right. That's when the first English speaking now year. But the year for us is in the year 2016. Just like the year for you is 25, the year for us is 2975, okay, according to our ancestors' calendar. So the year is 2016 for the Berber year, and the first year of the English speaking now year, going to William the Conqueror when he invaded England, starts in the year 1066. The year 1065, you don't see it. Let's look at it. The English final year is not applicable. Okay? It's not even applicable. Because we weren't English kings, we were Berber kings. Wittemon, the wise council. The same people we were back then, we are today. You just choose to be something that you're not. Okay? You who write your books, set your timeline. Let's go back to Unum Sanctum. Unum Sanctum. So we know in 1st century AD, the Berbers were converted to Christianity. Okay? As a result of the Gregorian mission by Pope Gregory I and Augustine of Canterbury, okay, called the Gregorian mission. This is the relationship between the Catholic Church and the state, all right? Why did this happen? Based upon the Papa Paul Bull called Unum Sanctum, based upon usufruct, the use of the land that did not belong to the Roman Catholics, okay? Very important. That's why we exist today, to make sure that the property of the English church do not fall into the bycall of Christ, because they claim to be Christ. The Pope claims to be Christ. Let's look at it. Unum Sanctum. Now we see that Jesus Christ, they claim to be descended down from the Merovingian dynasty, which are the Frankish kings, contrast to the English kings, okay? Now we know that the Magna Carta was dissolved by Pope Innocent III on behalf of the English church, and said the English church should be free from any influence of the Roman Catholic. This was what King Edgar did in the 19th century, in the 10th century, okay? That was the whole purpose and intent. The bull was promulgated during the ongoing dispute between Boniface VIII and King Philip IV of France, of the Capetine dynasty, which is the branch of the Spanish Empire, okay? Started by Queen Isabella of Castile and Ferdinand III, which are all Frankish houses from Transmoria on down to Savoy, okay? You got to know your history, brothers and sisters. So the bull promulgated during the ongoing dispute between the Boniface the eighth, and King Philip IV of France. Philip had levied taxes on the French clergy of half their annual income. This was the levy. this was a tax, okay, a tariff, okay, or a fief, feudalism, okay, fief. It says here, Boniface responded with the papal bull called Clericis Lexius that forbade clerics without authority from the Holy See to pay taxes to temporal rulers and threatened excommunication on the rulers who demanded such payments. Okay? Now, we just read King Edward I of England in a 1790 case in Chisholm versus Georgia in regards to the birthright inheritance that was also mentioned by Edward III, his grandson, in regards to those Berber Anglo-Saxon, now called English people, in regards to the conveyance of land that was promised based upon lottery of season, which was the way the land was conveyed, going back all the way to Asherton, the Twig and Turf ceremony, which I talked about in part 1 of this lecture. Okay, so if you didn't catch that, you need to go back and watch that. So King Edward III defended his own taxes powers by putting defiant clergy under outlawry. This is called outlaw. Okay, this is where the term outlaw come from. A Roman law concept withdrawing their protection under the English common law. So if you didn't obey the laws of England, then you were not protected by the English common law versus the Roman law, because it wasn't English who invaded Rome, it was Rome who invaded England. And prior to them calling English, they were called Berbers. Okay? Very important. If everyone understands that, please give me a thumbs up in the chat line to let me know you're on the same page. So the papal bull that was passed by Pope Boniface VIII was against Philip IV of the Capetine dynasty, all going back to what they call the Albigensian Crusade. The Albigensian Crusade going back to Edward I, okay, and his descendants who were married by way of alliances with the Frankish kings, okay? Very important. Let's go for a little more down here. Right. The Jubilee year of 1300 filled Rome with fervent masses of pilgrims who supplied the lack of French gold and treasury. The following year, Philip IV's ministers overstepped their bounds. Okay, this is a Frankish king again, I might add. He overstepped their bounds, and the Albigensian Crusade, the suppression of the Cathar heresy, had brought much Languedoc under French royal control, but in the farther south, heretics still survived, and Bernard Sayacet, Bishop of Palmyras and Forex, was recalcitrant and a solvent with the king. So we're talking about the Albigensian Crusade, which was the conflict between the Frankish dynasties, i.e. the Frankish Roman Catholic dynasty, and the Frankish English kings who were married as a result of alliances between English and French kings and queens, okay? You must understand the history. How I know it? Let's see. Albigensian Crusade. Let's look at it. This was started by Pope Innocent III, who declared in 1215 that the English church should be free. Okay? The English church should be free. He was on our side. Okay? Pope Innocent III. Very important. Albigensian Crusade, also known as the Cathar Crusade, this goes back into the Crusades, going back to Jerusalem. Why do you think Edward III, Edward II, Edward I, Henry III, Richard, John, Henry II, all sons of Godfrey, the fifth kind of man, Jew, son of folk, ruler of Jerusalem, the king of Jerusalem, going back to the movie of Kingdom of Heaven, okay? We must understand that I am who I say I am. I am the son of the living God. Let's get it. Who are the belligerents in this crusade? Let's look at it. When the Magna Carta was dissolved by Pope Innocent III, that started the Barron War, okay? One of the bold barons was Simon de Montfort, okay? Very important. The belligerents in this war was Philip II of the Capetine dynasty, Louis VIII of the Capetine dynasty, okay? Frankish, Roman Catholic. Then you got Raymond VI of Tosala and Raymond VII of Tosala, who had Frankish by way of marriage to the English kings. How we know that? Let's look at it. Raymond VIII, Count of Toulouse. Raymond was born of Chateau Beauclerc. This is French ancestry. The son of Raymond VI of Toulouse and Joanne of England, the great daughter, or one of the greatest daughters of who? Edward I. How I know? Let's check it out. And Joanne of England, through his mother, he was the grandson of Henry II of England and nephew of King Richard I and John of England, the one who signed the Magna Carta. Okay? The one who signed the Magna Carta. All right? Let's see. Who was her? We're talking about Raymond Dudley. His mother was Joanne of England. Okay? Joanne of England. Who is Joanne of England? Let's see. Joanne of England was married to Queen of was by marriage Queen of Sicily and Countess of Toulouse. She was the seventh child of King Henry II of England and Duchess of Eleanor of Aquitaine. Okay? Eleanor of Aquitaine. Okay? These are French queens marrying an English king. Henry II was the son of Godfrey V, Count of Anjou, son of Fulk, ruler of Jerusalem. All unified in the Albigensian Crusade, part of the original crusade in regard to the protection of the bloodline with Jesus Christ, so-called term Jesus Christ, descended down from going back to Mary Magdalene. Okay? Very important. And in Louis D, this all connects to the Stroud of Turin. This all connected to Mary Magdalene's skull. Her actual skull was actually found and is a possession of one of the Frankish kings. Okay? Very important that you understand what I'm talking to you about. Okay? Henry II, King of England, son of Godfrey V, Count of Anjou, son of Fulk, ruler of Jerusalem. Okay? Very important. So that was the Albigensian Crusade, going back to the ancestry, which involved Mary Magdalene, the mother of Jesus. Okay? Very important. Where else did I want to go right here? All right. Coming to my closing. Uno Sanctum. Let's go back there. Which is part 2 of part 1. Background of Unum Sanctum. Relationship of church and state, the Catholic Church. The papacy of divine rights of kings, in closing. And remember, Pope Leo the 14th was just inaugurated as the Roman Catholic Vicar of Christ, okay? And he was from the Augustine friary, going back to Augustine of Hippo, which was a Carthage Berber, okay? Very important to understand that in 2025. So this goes back to the divine right of kings. So this could have been no more, this is right on point, all right? His incarnation, American Roman Catholic Pope. All right. The doctrine of the divine right of kings came to the dominant medieval concept of kingship claiming biblical authority. All right. Augustine Hippo, in his work, The City of God, has stated in his opinion that while the city of men and the city of God may stand at a cross purposes, both of them have been instituted by God and serve his ultimate will. At the same time, the revolution also challenged the theological basis of royal authority. The doctrine of popular sovereignty directly challenges the former divine rights of kings. The king was to govern on behalf of the people and not under the orders of God. This philosophical differences over the basis of royal and state power was paralleled by the rise of a short-lived democracy, but also by a change first from absolute monarchy to constitutional monarchy and finally to republicanism. This is what you have now, brothers and sisters. Okay? This is what you have now. Under the doctrine of the divine right of kings, only the church or God could interfere with the right of the monarch to rule. Thus, the attack on the French absolute monarchy was seen as an attack on God's anointed king. Did you hear that? On God's anointed king. So God's anointed savior of the world must be a king. In addition, the church leadership came largely for the classes most threatened by the growing revolution. The upper clergy came from the same family as the upper nobility, and the church was, in its own right, the largest landowners in France, going back to the kings of England and France, married to the Plantagenet king. Okay, you must understand how important this is that I'm revealing to you today, because you are in the end of times. Okay, you are in the end of time. Well, I want to see anything else. Let's look a little bit more to Tosh so we can see if he see anything else important. Let's see.
When Traficant spoke on the floor, and you already know they neutralized him later.
Yeah.
And hypothecation, use that when you're looking at user property, because that is the term that's used among themselves, but not to the public. And hypothecation is what the marriage license is used for, the birth certificate is used for. Thank you, Prime Minister. The birth certificate is used for.
You heard that, Prime Minister. He called him a Prime Minister. That's a United Kingdom term, okay? We must understand that he is COINTELPRO, okay? Coup d'etat. He called him a Prime Minister, okay? So he does not know a thing about lottery of season. And I'm going to close on that. Lottery of season. You don't know what that means? You should watch my first video. Part 1. We the people, the English in God's church. Lottery of season is an archaic legal conveyancing ceremony formerly practiced in feudal England and in other countries following the English common law, used to convey holdings in property. The term lottery is close relative to the synonymous word meaning delivery, okay? There's two varieties of lottery of season. It didn't say adverse season, it says lottery of season. Lottery means delivery and season means possession. It says lottery of season could refer to either lottery of deed, whereby the parties meet together on the land and to transfer symbolic deliberate possession of the land by handing over a twig and turf or clump of earth to the recipient, or by either lottery of law, whereby the parties went within the of the land and the transfer declared to the recipient that possession was being given, followed by us, the recipient, entering onto that land. That was the promise made to God, the Almighty, and the people in the state of New Jersey in regards to how we would come into our possession. He didn't give us no piece of paper. He didn't give us a well. It was created by operation of law. And I just showed you the overthrow when they said it in Chittum versus Georgia. I mean, United States versus Warren Kmart. They helped overthrow the crown. So the only two ways in closing is lobby of deed and lobby of law. And lobby of law is by way of you going into what your ancestors promised by way of operation of law. And that involves the ceremony called the Twig and Turf ceremony that was here prior to 1707. The Twig and Turf ceremony dates back from feudal era, but was used regularly in early colonial America, allowing the English Scottish, i.e. British Scottish, after 1707 turned British, by virtue of their monarch's claim to take sovereign possession over unclaimed land. This is called bona vacatia. This process has taken several forms over the centuries. So it was the Scottish who seized the power and prerogatives of the crown. United States versus Lee. Okay? Very important. The customary practice for the conveyance was based upon how our ancestors set it up, going back to King Alfred the Great's son, called Asserton, noble stone, and you can see his complexion. All right? And if you're not an heir, the twig and turf I give to thee as free as Asserton gave to me, and a hope and loving thou brother thou will be. You must be a brother of the craft. Okay? This ceremony you see right here, Lottery of Season, is preserved right here. Right here. Now, Taj does not know a thing about how you are to come into your possession. He don't have a clue because he don't understand the law. What law? The English law. You now call them revised statutes. Okay, but they are in fact English statutes governing English law for the English people based upon God's conveyance of the land to them by way of the law governing conveyance and the use of the property that God conveyed to them by lobby of law. Okay? Lobby of law through the ancient solemn act of lottery of season. Any other method or form of conveyance contrary to that form of practice is notwithstanding. I didn't say it. The 2024 and 2025 statute passed by Henry VIII, the statutes of uses, all governing usufruct or use, whatever term you choose to use, it clearly says right here in English, plain English, so everyone can understand it. It ain't in Islamic law, it ain't in Moorish law, it ain't in Scottish, it's not in Portuguese, and it's not in any other language but in English, so there can be no misinterpreting of what the law said. It says every person to whom the use or uses of any real estate within the state of New Jersey, going back to we the people and God Almighty having a conversation about those liberties and rights that they will have for generations to come as established by that Constitution of 1947, which is Article 1 saying that we have the right to life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness in regards to acquiring, possession, and protecting the property. So it says in closing, every person to whom the use or usage of any real estate within the state have been sold, giving, limited, granted, released, or conveyed by deed, grant, or any other legal conveyance whatsoever, or that shall hereafter be granted by any deed, conveyance whatsoever, and his heirs and assignees shall be held to be in full and ample possession of such real estate to all intent, construction, and purposes, as if such person or heir or assignee, all right, heir or assignee were in possession thereof by solemn library of season, and possession and usage or custom to the contrary, is what? Notwithstanding. Okay? It is notwithstanding. So if the heirs are not there, or the trustees who were assigned to be the benefactors or the trustees for the heirs, then guess what? It falls to what they call inquisition post-mortem. Inquisition post-mortem. What is that? That is the process of lottery of season that you just read in the New Jersey Revised Statute. What happens in inquisition post-mortem? Let's look. In closing. Under the feudal system, all land belonged to the monarch and was therefore either held by him directly, the royal demesne, or on his behalf, directly or indirectly. Those who held land directly on the king's behalf were known as tenant-in-chief. So if you are an heir, then you are the tenant-in-chief. You are the landlords. You have the right to convey. You have the right to possess. You have the right to own. You have the right to record any property that belongs to the English church, known as the crown, personified by the king, under the authority of the king by way of his personification of the crown of England. And when those who held land directly on behalf of the crown or the king behalf were known as the tenant-in-chief, and when a tenant-in-chief died without an heir, his land did what? Escheated, to fell into the hands of the king, meaning that if you aren't alive, the only person that can retrieve it is the king. I didn't say that. You find that in the United States versus Standard Oil Company, in the United States versus what? Otis Elevator Company and Standard Oil Company. All right. It says when the land is allodial and there is no heir, the king is next of kin. Okay, the king is next of kin. All right. So if you don't want to be heirs, then I have to create heirs and succeed it to them based upon how it's supposed to be delivered by way of lottery of law, of how our ancestors did it. Okay, so there you see the lottery of season based upon how we see it in the New Jersey Revised Statute 46:3-9, and no court in any court of the state of New Jersey will bar that issue. Okay, so with that, I love you all. I hope that you watch part 1 of this lesson fully, and then watch part 2 and put those two together, and you will see that everything I'm saying was promised a long time ago. Okay, so with that, I'll stop the video and see if there's any questions on the floor before I close out. Are there any questions before I go? Speak now or forever hold your peace. Are there any questions before I go? Thank you for joining me, Brother Nunley, as well as Countess Jones. I appreciate you for joining me. Any questions? So again, remember, we the people of any state within the state of New Jersey or any state of the United States are the true sovereigns, okay? All right, but you have to be an English sovereign, because if you claim to be a Moorish sovereign, then they're going to throw the monkey wrench on you, because that's not your law, okay? You have no inheritance. I will, Brother Nunley, you do the same. So with that,